Hello, learners. Welcome back to the course on social processes and behavioral issues. We are in the session 3, unit 11 of this course, and today we shall be talking about impression management and attribution. With today's session, we round off our discussions on perception and attribution as well. Now, what shall we be doing during this session? To be specific, we shall be looking at impression management and attrition in today's sessions. Now, coming to the first, which is impression management, once again, I would like to stress that this is something that we keep hearing day in and day out, and impression management is absolutely important for all of us who manage and balance 1,000 different activities during the day. Now, what is impression management? Typically, organization behavior defines impression management as self-presentation, and it is an attempt by an individual to manipulate and control the impression that others form about them. So basically, how do people perceive you? Now, can that be controlled? One way of looking at it is through impression management. Now, there are two facets or two phases of impression management. The first is called impression motivation. Now, what is the meaning of impression motivation? This is the degree to which an individual actively manages the impression that he or she makes. The next is impression construction. Now, what does this mean? This talks about how an individual has consciously chosen an image to convey and also on how he goes about doing that. So, what kind of image do I want to convey to the world out there? And what are the strategies that I take upon myself to maintain that image is called as impression construction. So impression management is a very, very important activity that most of us, 99% of us, indulge in day in and day out to some extent, in some form. So basically, it takes two forms, or it has two facets called as impression motivation and impression construction. Now, moving ahead, what can be impression management strategies? Now, these can be clubbed together in two broad categories, the first of which is called as preventive strategies. Now, what are preventive strategies? The first is justification of action. Now, here is where an individual tries to justify and rationalize vocally what he or she has done. The next is forwarding an apology. The individual, in order to maintain an impression, forwards an apology for things that have misfired or have not gone down well with the organization or with important stakeholders in and out of the organization or elsewhere in society. So when you forward an apology, that is also some form of impression management, and it is a preventive strategy. The third is dissociation. Dissociation is actively followed by individuals when they maintain a particular kind of impression in the society. Now, what is the meaning of dissociation? This is a strategy where individuals try to disassociate themselves from a situation that has gone wrong. So either you try to establish that you had nothing to do with the situation, or that you were hardly ever linked up with the situation, or that you had any direct contact with the stakeholders or the persons in question. So this is called as disassociation. Now, apart from these three preventive strategies, there are also 4 promotional strategies. Now, what is the meaning of promotional strategies? This is how people build an impression. This is how they convey an impression. And these strategies are also necessary to maintain a particular form of impression that people want to convey. Now, the first of them is entitlement. Supposing as individuals within a team or a project or an organization, you feel that you have not been given credit for the work that you have done. You vocally voice that concern and you maintain that you should be getting credit for the kind of work that you have done, and that this credit should not be going to anyone else. So that is first, that is called as entitlement. You feel that you are entitled to the credit for a work that you have done, and you move or you voice your concerns about getting that entitlement. The second is called as enhancement. What is the meaning of enhancement? Enhancement is when you do get credit for the work that you have done. You do get recognition for the work that you have done, but you don't think that this credit or recognition is enough. So what you would want is something more. for what you have already done. So when you voice your concerns about not getting enough credit, not getting enough recognition, that is called as enhancement. Now, the third is obstacle disclosure. What is the meaning of obstacle disclosure? This is where you publicly voice what obstacles, personal and professional, you had to undergo or you had to overcome in order to do the work at hand. So this is how you create an aura around the work that you have done. So in order to get the work done, you have maintained great amount of sacrifices on a personal or professional front. That's called as obstacle disclosure. And the fourth is association. Just like you would not wish to be associated with any event that is a resounding failure, so also an association, people who are high on impression management strategies would want to get associated with the right kind of situation and with the right kind of people, so that they are always in the limelight and they convey a feeling of success to the people who meet them and the people who associate with them. Now, moving on from impression management, we get into the world of attribution. Now, what is the meaning of attribution? Now, if you remember in Unit 1 of this, in the session 1 of Unit 11, we had started with perception, where we looked at the kind of image that people try to draw about others or the context around them. Now, attribution goes one step further. It talks about the judgment that you normally ascribe to people around you. So let us say you perceive a person to be short-tempered, but in attrition, you give a judgment. That means, why do you think that the person is short-tempered? So that's the difference between perception and attribution, as attribution goes one step ahead of perception. So typically speaking, attribution is the process through which individuals attempt to determine the causes behind others' behavior. It has its roots in the pioneering cognitive theories proposed by Festinger and Lewin, and the theory's founder is recognized as Wright's Heider. Heider believed that both internal forces, that is the ability, effort, etc., and external forces, that is the environment around you, combine to determine behavior. That means, a person's behavior can be ascribed to internal factors which are situated inside the person and the world around them, meaning the external environment. So what kind of attributions can you have? The first is called as dispositional attributions. Now, what is this? This is when you ascribe a person's behavior to internal factors primarily, okay? The next is called as situational attributions, which ascribe a person's behavior to external factors. And there is something called as correspondent influence, where you form judgments about person's dispositions, traits, and characteristics that correspond to what we have observed of their actions. So basically, attributions can be internal, that means you ascribe causes to internal factors. They also can be external, where you ascribe causes to external factors. So these, dispositional and situational attributions have led to the growth of something called as the attribution theory, or how you judge others. Our perception and judgment of others are significantly influenced by our assumptions of other people's internal states. So when individuals observe behavior, they attempt to determine whether it is internally or externally caused. Internal causes are under the person's control, but external causes are not under the control of people. So causation is judged in the attribution theory to three factors. The first of them is called as distinctiveness, which shows different behaviors in different situations. The next is called as consensus, where the response is the same as others to the same situation. And the third is consistency, where people respond in the same way over time. So now let's see how these three elements play together in the attribution theory. Now, take a look at this diagram. Now, when individuals observe behavior, they attempt to determine whether it is internally or externally caused. That is what we always do. And that is the meaning of attribution theory. So now let's look at it first. Distinctiveness, high or low. If distinctiveness is high, then the attribution of cause is external. If distinctiveness is low, then the attribution of cause is internal. Now let's take an example to the effect. Now, let us say a person is always punctual to the office. That means he always comes on time. Never is he late. But let us say one day of the week, the person arrives 10 minutes late. Now, is that high distinctiveness? Answer is yes, because the person is behaving differently in a particular situation. Now, idea is that if a person is always punctual, that means there is low degree of distinctiveness, behaves in the same manner, in the same situation. What do you say? You ascribe the cause to internal factors, which is what is written here in the diagram, that if distinctiveness is low, then the cause of attribution is internal. So if the person is always punctual to the office, what do you say? He is normally a punctual person, always is time bound, and that's the reason why he comes to the office on time. But if the same person is 10 minutes late on a particular day, then there is high degree of distinctiveness, and immediately you ascribe the cause to an external factor. So possibly the person was delayed because of traffic, possibly there was an accident on the way, etc., etc. So this is the first, which is called as distinctiveness. Now, what is the second? Second is consensus. Now, consensus, if it is high, then the attribution is external. Now, consensus, if it is low, then the attribution is internal. Now, once again, we can take an example. Now, let us say there is a discussion amongst team members about their boss, and nearly 99% of the team feels that the boss is very superficial and the boss is very biased. So there is where you find a general consensus among majority of the members in the team who voice that they don't have a good boss. So what do you say? You say that the attribution is external. But at the same time, if there is a single member who says that, no, I don't feel that he's superficial or biased or not a good boss, I think he's a good boss. So at that point in time, the attribution becomes internal. Why? Because the degree of consensus is very less. So immediately the others would think that why is he saying that the boss is good when all of us feel that the boss is bad? Why is this gentleman or lady saying that the boss is good? Maybe there is some amount of favoritism or there is some amount of advantage that these people are getting out of the boss, and that's the reason why they say so. So once again, if consensus is high, attribution is external. If consensus is low, then attribution is internal. But you will find a certain amount of difference when you go to the last element of the attribution theory, and that's called as consistency. Consistency is the similarity in behavior over a period of time. If there is high degree of consistency, attribution is internal. Person is always punctual to the office, so there is a high degree of consistency. Attribution is internal. If there is a low degree of consistency, then attribution becomes external. Now let's take a look at it in another figure. Now, what is distinctiveness? Does this person behave in this manner in other situations? If it is yes, then there is no distinctiveness. If it is no, then there is high distinctiveness. Now, what is consensus? Do other people behave in the same manner? If it's no, then there is low consensus. If it is yes, then there is a high degree of consensus. Now, consistency, does this person behave in the same manner at other times? If it is yes, high degree of consistency. If it is no, then low degree of consistency. Now, moving on from the attribution theory, attribution can also be a flawed process. That means it's not true that people always make an accurate judgment of others or other people's behavior. More often than not, people make very, very serious errors in judging others around them. And the two most important attributional errors are the fundamental attribution error and the self-serving bias. So let us start with fundamental attribution error. What is fundamental attribution error? The tendency to attribute others' actions to internal causes primarily, while largely ignoring external factors that may have also influenced behavior. Now, take a look at this sentence. He wrecked the company car because he was careless. You never thought that the wreckage of the car could have happened due to any other external factor. That means the driver of the other car was also careless, and there was an accident on the road while the person was coming to the office, etc. So largely when you ascribe causes of behavior to internal factors only. That is where you commit fundamental attribution error because you are completely ignoring the external factors that may have influenced behavior. Now, what is self-serving bias? People tend to present themselves favorably at all times. That is what impression management is all about. So people accept credit when everything goes right, but try to blame the failure on situational external factors. So, for example, let us say a student has done well in the exam. Student will immediately say, "Of course, I would have done well because I had put in a lot of effort." So, credit goes to me. Supposing the same student does not do well in the exam, then the student would say, or if the student would say that, "What could I have done? Maximum questions have come out of syllabus." So blame goes to external factors, whereas credit only goes to internal factors. So that's called as self-serving bias. Now moving on, how do you improve the process of social perception and attribution? Because these are fundamentally flawed processes, and these errors can have a serious impact on individuals and organizations. So how do you improve this process? The first, of course, is meaningful interaction, where you interact with people in a meaningful manner, and this will lead to less of reliance on stereotypes. So you are interested in the individual himself or herself. You are not interested to look at the group to which he or she belongs. Now, empathy is a person's ability to understand and to be sensitive to the feelings, thoughts, and situations of others. So if you have a high degree of emotional intelligence, then there is a great chance that you would meaningfully interact with others and not commit the typical kind of, superficial perceptual errors that people normally indulge in. Now, the next is mutual understanding, where one can use the Johari window. Now, this window was developed by Joseph Luft and Harry Ingham. So that's how you have the abbreviation of Joe and Harry becoming Johari window. The model of personal and interpersonal understanding that encourages disclosure and feedback to increase the open area and reduce the blind, hidden, and unknown areas of oneself. Johari is actually a self-development tool and can be utilized by everybody in an organization to avoid the kind of errors that we normally get in when we are, perceiving or attributing. Now, what is the Johari window? Johari window has 4 parts to it, 4 windows basically. And the matrix is divided on 2 quadrants. The first is what is known to yourself, and the second is what is known to others. So when you combine what is known to yourself and what is known to others, you get 4 windows. Now let's look at the first window. First window is called as the open window or the arena, which is the best because this is a window into the person's psyche, which is known to himself or herself and is also known to the world around him or her. So that's the arena for you. Then you would have something called as a blind window. Blind is quite dangerous. Why? Because it is a window that may be known to others, but it is not known to the person himself or herself. It's almost like when you feel that you are giving your best, but the people around you know that you are, or feel that no, you're not giving your best. There is still a lot of potential, but that is largely untapped. So that's the blind window. Now, there is a third window, which is called as facade or the mask or the hidden window. Now, this is a window that is known to the person, but it is not known to others around him or her. So that's called as the hidden window. And there is an unknown window, which is also called as the dark window, which is a window that is not known to the person and also not known to others. So the idea of the Johari window is that we need to take steps to decrease the blind, hidden, and the dark window in our psyche and to increase the arena or the open window as much as possible. So these can be some routes to improving the process of social perception and attribution. And these tools can become very, very important in reducing the kind of perceptual errors, attributional errors, and biases that we normally indulge in. So in today's class, our focus has been on understanding impression management and the 2 facets of impression management, namely impression motivation and impression construction. Also important for us is to understand what preventive and promotional strategies do people undertake to maintain a particular impression in organization and society at large. Then we have discussed the meaning of attribution, what is the difference between perception and attribution, and how attribution can be ascribed to internal and external causes. If you are ascribing attribution to internal causes, you're talking about dispositional attribution. And when you are ascribing attribution to external causes, you're talking about situational attributions. Then we moved on to attribution theory, where we looked at three elements: distinctiveness, consensus, and consistency. And we understood that how high or low degrees of distinctiveness, consensus, and consistency would lead to external or internal attribution. Now, moving on from the attribution theory, we discussed the two major attributional errors which can happen while you're making judgment of others, namely fundamental attribution error and the self-serving bias. And lastly, we have discussed strategies of improving upon social perception and attribution in order to avoid the kind of biases and errors that we normally indulge in. So this has been our route of discussion for today. Thank you so much for a patient listening and happy learning to all of you.